We are not going to waste time. I'll ask the minister. She's with the DG today. So it's a two-part session. The first part is the remarks by the minister on the various things. And then later on, it will be the DG who will be taking us through a presentation on the state of readiness. And Dr. Paula has also arrived. So we can now start in earnest. Minister, please come through. Thank you so much.
No, thank you very much, Dr. Elijah. Let me acknowledge DG and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. And I think you'll agree, I can see one of our journalists is reminding us that it would be appropriate to congratulate the Springboks for the stunning win last night, because indeed as a country they've made us proud, and we're very excited to receive again the trophy from Paris, and want to say well done, and we really can't wait for the victory parade when they come back home. So as we stand, ladies and gentlemen, we are exactly on the brink of the 2023 National Senior Certificate exams for the class of 2023. And I must start off by acknowledging the dedication and the commitment of South Africans to our sector in ensuring smooth exams. The number paints a very promising picture of our education landscape as we prepare for the exam starting tomorrow, though other papers like your ICTs have already been written. We must also indicate that Umalusi has approved all the question papers to be administered for this October-November exams and have given us a nod to continue or to proceed with the exams. We have again enhanced our security measures to prevent possible paper leaks in all our 9 provinces. We've been working with State Security Agency, which has audited all these processes, and the provincial education departments have to follow the operating standard procedures on storage points and follow all the security protocols. Moreover, the specific collection times for question papers by chief invigilators have been established to deter early access of the papers, and each PED has its own regulatory committee to anticipate and mitigate any crisis that may arise. And to mitigate against the challenges of load shedding, all PEDs and schools have devised contingency plans, including backup generators. The computer application technology and information technology papers were generally conducted this week without power issues with isolated incidents. So the affected candidates were isolated and managed, and will offer a backup paper if needed due to power interruptions. In South African Sign Home Language, candidates' laptops will be fully charged before each examinations commence, and the backup power supply measures have been also put in place. This year, ladies and gentlemen, we take pride in announcing that we have over 717,377 full-time candidates who are registered across the 6,998 centers nationwide. And these figures, I think we'll all agree that they're not mere statistics. They embody the aspirations, dreams, and relentless efforts of our grade 12 learners. They stand as a testament to the resilience of our students and the continuous dedication of the Department of Basic Education in providing them with a platform to succeed. So when we compare this year's figures to those of 2022, we observe a gradual decrease in the number of candidates about 34,626 candidates are less as compared to last year, and this could be attributed to the fact that more candidates complete their qualifications on time. There's been also an increase in the number of part-time learners, which is also happening, from 168,631 in 2021 to 181,143 this year. There's a total of 207 question papers. We have engaged, trained, and employed 72,500 invigilators and 52,500 markers will be marking the exams. Furthermore, our roster, as I say, boasts of 72,500 invigilators as compared to 72,000 invigilators last time. As Elijah has indicated, Dr. Polio will come and give you a full report around the examinations, and he'll come after. But we thought that it's imperative to also provide an update on other key developments in the basic education sector now that we have the opportunity to really address the nation. We all will recall that on Thursday, the 26th of October, the National Assembly passed the Basic Education Law Amendments Bill, the Bella Bill, and these amendments address some of the key challenges that have for years hindered the progress of our work and the ecosystem. Amongst others, the Bella Bill is going to start making grade R compulsory because it was not compulsory in the previous law. It will also serve to capture the essence of court judgments, because there are a number of judgments that had required us to align our laws to the developments and changes that were happening in the country. But it will also provide financial and public accountability frameworks for governing bodies and provincial departments. System and administrative improvements in terms of admission policy, in particular pertaining to undocumented learners. Because again, you'll recall that there's been lots of difficulties about whether we admit undocumented learners or we don't. And the court had compelled us to say it's the children's right to be admitted. So we had to find ways of saying, how do we manage the process whilst we have to admit them without any documentation? There are also issues that for technical and substantive adjustments, the bill also clarifies certain provisions and insert provisions which are not provided for in the existing legislation and strengthen the enforcement mechanism for offense and mechanisms. Amongst others, the management of teenage pregnancy in the school, because it is law that we can't expel learners, but the thing has to be quite clear, how is it managed in schools? For how long does the child stay in school? Because we're not delivering babies, but we have young girls who fall pregnant that we want to support and assist to stay as long as they can without harming themselves and harming the girl child. But it also responds to current needs in terms of the changing demographic of our communities, finding by courts and our own observation as we monitor schools. The bill has 56 clauses, ranging from the introduction of grade R, as I've indicated, to learner attendance, to code of conduct for learners, homeschooling, rationalization of schools, abolishment of corporal punishment, and initiations. Because indeed, you'll also recall that most schools would systematically have initiations, and we had to formally outlaw any initiation in schools. It also refers to language policy, admission policy, and criminalization of disruptions of schools. All the above clauses in the bill are about providing access to education and providing a child-friendly environment as per the dictates of our international treaties. The country cannot fold arms and watch parents using children as traffic lights, as beggars, instead of sending them to school. That's why we've made compulsory education, basic education compulsory. The country cannot also afford to have children working in farms or on streets, nor allow adults to use children for their service delivery protests at the expense of the children's education. So that it will be illegal indeed to get kids to be marching during school hours and when they are service delivery protests. So I want to reiterate that there is no taking away of powers of SGBs. The fact that language and admission policies were solely used to determine and educate by SGBs with veto powers without checks and balances led to abuse of such powers when such schools excluded learners in those schools using discriminatory practices such as admitting learners according to race, ability of parents to pay school fees, academic performance, and sporting abilities. In reality, the Bella Bill aspires to harmonize the powers of the SPGs with the directives of the relevant provincial heads of department. Whilst the SGB is initially tasked with setting a school's language policy, the bill emphasizes that this authority is not unequivocal. It ascertains that such policies are adaptable, are inclusive, and congruent with the constitutional rights to basic education for every learner. Again, Program Director, I wish to also report on the progress that we're doing around early childhood development. I thought it would be really vital to update the nation on the progress regarding the work we do in ECD. Since receiving the function, DBE has placed a strong focus on increasing the quality of early learning programs, and early learning practitioners have been trained in the implementation of the National Curriculum Framework for children from birth to 4. The National Curriculum Framework for children from birth to 4, early learning practitioners have been trained also in Play South Africa Online. Learning practitioners and caregivers are using the ECD MOBI application regularly, and early learning programs have been monitored and supported across all provinces. This year, we trained 18,200 parents on the National Parenting Program in collaboration with the various partners, and 2,226 early learning practitioners are also being trained in the NQF Level 4 qualification. And DB is in the process of developing very clear quality early learning program standards that are linked to improve child outcomes. These standards will provide early learning programs, parents and society as a whole with clear expectations of what quality early learning programs delivery entails. These quality standards will be implemented by taking a developmental approach to supporting current early learning programs to meet the required expectations. The recent State South Africa census indicated that 2.8 million children are accessing early learning programs, but it is estimated that a further 1.3 million children aged between 3 and 5 still require access to these programs. Currently, about 760 children are benefiting from the ECD subsidy to enable further access to early learning programs. So to address all these gaps and to improve the quality of early learning programs, DB has developed a vision and strategy for achieving universal access to early learning programs by 2030. The strategy proposes a new ECD compact with all role players, including national, provincial, and local government, business, donors, civil society, and parents, and everybody again in the country. Over the coming months, we will engage with all role players to explore the part that they can play in realizing the vision, this vision. And if children of South Africa thrive, we all believe that everybody will be thriving. Again, on school infrastructure, I wish to report that as a department, we are working together with the provincial departments to intensify the all-important work of delivering school infrastructure. The department is confident that the annual performance plan targets will be met and that the budget allocated will be fully utilized. And the department has developed detailed tracking tools, and monitoring is taking place daily to ensure that the implementing agents deliver as expected. At the moment, 2,871 schools have been provided with new sanitation facilities through the SAFE program. The 511 schools that are remaining are at various stages of implementation, and DB plans to provide all these schools with sanitation facility by end of March 2024. And we are doing all that we can to ensure that we provide conducive environment for teaching and learning. The last one, without taking long, I can see a program director who restless. It's about the Oppenheimer Education Report. I really want to reiterate our response to the education report released by the Oppenheimer Memorial Trust. Because the report focuses on the future of South Africa's education system. It presents several interesting proposals, drawing from research and interviews. However, its diagnosis is in certain aspects inaccurate or one-sided, which weakens the report and the validity of its proposals. So many of the proposals made in the report are drawn straight from the NDP, meaning they are proposals currently being pursued by government to varying degrees of success by government. By not looking beyond NDP, especially the MTSF, which enact and sometimes adapt to the recommendations of the NDP, the Oppenheimer Education Report misses an opportunity to engage more deeply with what government is doing. The weakness of this report, particularly with respect to diagnosis of the problem, the basic education sector, is very deliberate in excluding some of the issues of language and how it impacts on opportunities for learning. A proper desktop review of the complex education system would have ideally extended not just to government documents, but also a critical view of teacher union policies, reviews of the South Africa's education system by global bodies such as the OECD, and how the media covers education. So the Oppenheimer Memorial Trust has therefore missed an opportunity for a meaningful engagement on the current state of education system, and more specifically, the plans that are underway to address various priority areas referred to in the report. So in pursuit of supporting the stance of fresh thinking and action in higher education institutions, DB has requested a colloquium for discourse with all relevant bodies in education, which include all higher education institutions, where DBE's Director General will address the forum. Amongst other issues which will be raised at the symposium is the science of teaching reading. And this is very important to bring new ideas. The DBE will request all higher education institutions and other stakeholders endowed with imparting knowledge at higher education institutions to reconsider their methodology of teaching reading and other aspects of content knowledge gap and the teaching of learners with special education needs. Because this includes the logic of reading for meaning in African languages that needs to be revised as a matter of extreme urgency. And the pills will also be unpacked further and will report on some of the developments and the work that we're doing as a country to really clarify some of the issues that constantly are misunderstood, misrepresented, but also misdiagnosed. But at that point, Chair, let me invite Dr. Polio to come and bring us a presentation. And thank you very much for your attention.
Good afternoon to our Honorable Minister, our Director General, officials of the department present, members of the media, and let me also greet the South African nation. As our Minister has indicated, this is indeed a significant Sunday, and I don't think, Minister, we as a department could have asked for anything more better and more powerful as a motivator and a precursor to the commencement of our examination on the 30th of October, which is tomorrow. I believe, Minister, that the grit and determination that we saw in France last night is the kind of grit and determination we will see in our learners over the next 6 weeks. as Minister has indicated, I'm going to attempt to provide you with a more detailed account of two very important aspects. Our DG refers to them as two sides of the same coin. We, in preparation for the 31st or the 30th of October, looked at learner readiness, which is very important. We sometimes refer to it as academic readiness, and we've also focused on the exam system readiness. And this is the outline of my presentation as I deal with both these parts. And I'll start with learner readiness and then move on to the actual examination system, which Minister has already alluded to. Now, when we talk about learner readiness, I think we'll be failing in our duty if we do not very briefly track the road traveled by the class of 2023. Our DG is of the view that this is possibly the most disadvantaged group of the last 3 years, given the impact of COVID. These learners in 2020, during the height of COVID, were in their grade 9 year. Now, we are all aware that the grade 9 year is the year in which learners determine the selection of subjects in grade 10, which then they take through into grade 11 and grade 12. So grade 9 is an important year from that perspective. But these learners lost 60% of their teaching time, and because of the reduced teaching time, we as a department had to very quickly look at an option, and what we then did was trimmed the curriculum, but it was not a trimming that was not considered very closely, that was consulted on, and what we did is we retained core concepts, core topics, which were necessary for the subsequent grades. But nonetheless, the fact that they were not exposed to the full curriculum would certainly have impacted on them. In 2021, because of social distancing, they were subjected to rotational attendance, which therefore means they did not have the full exposure to classroom engagement. And obviously, they were exposed to what is referred to as the recovery ATP, which looked at core content. In 2022, we had normal attendance, 2023, normal attendance, but this was now the two critical years of their lives in grade 11 and grade 12. But what I can say is that as a department, the recovery plan, in order to make good the losses suffered by these learners, kicked in immediately. And I will try and give you a summary of what was done in these years. In this particular slide, I further articulate what are some of the challenges, and I think I've covered most of them. But one important point is that these learners, some of them, had to drop off 1 or 2 subjects simply because of the limited time. And as a result, this may have had an impact on their subsequent years of teaching and learning. We amended the assessment requirements. Now, the reason we amended the assessment requirements is because we had to move the focus to school-based assessment and give the teacher and the professionalism of the teacher a higher focus and a higher premium. But however, the downside of this is that these learners may not have had the exposure to examinations. We had to remove examinations and replace it with what we refer to as controlled tests. So this gives you some kind of indication of the limitations suffered by this group. And this is a good pictorial representation of the challenges suffered by the class of 2023. So what then was the support program? Now, it's interesting that the support program had a two-pronged approach. We had nationally driven initiatives and we had provincial specific program. And these provincial specific program looked at specific cohorts at district, at school level, what their particular limitations and gaps were, and the provincial specific programs attended to that. So I'm going to start with the provincial specific programs, and let me tell you, if I had to go through all the provincial specific programs, we'll be here for another 2 to 3 hours. So what I'm going to try to do is just give you a snapshot and give you examples of what are some of the kind and nature of programs that our provinces had embarked on. Now, what is very significant is that support started immediately in grade 10 in 2021, and that's the year that learners would have gone into rotational attendance. Now, this is an indication of the various kind of program, in addition to what was being offered in the classroom, and to make good for the rotational attendance that they were subjected to. Broadcast lessons, radio lessons, self-study resources, support packages, even videos on specific content topics which we realized that our learners would be struggling with. In 2023, we then increased that, and this now became the increased range of programs that were offered to these specific learners in 2022 while they were in grade 11. Now, this is an example of a program that was designed and obviously overseen by the national department in the case of the Eastern Cape. It's just one example. And similar designs in terms of the planning of the programs would have applied across all provinces. In the case of the Eastern Cape, they extended the daily program by an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon to make good that loss. LTSM, soft and hard copies of Mind the Gap study guides, electronic textbook, notes, concept banks, worksheets were made available. We brought back the June exam in order to deal with the issue of learners not being ready to take an examination. ICT support, I spoke about radio lessons, and I'll talk a little more about the teacher development workshops, and I'll provide more detail in terms of autumn, winter, spring, and weekend classes. But this is just pointing to what was done in the Eastern Cape. Another area that we focused on was our learners with special needs. We realized that COVID would have impacted on them far more than our learners who were in the normal stream schools. For example, if you look at the Eastern Cape, where they have 40 special schools, very interestingly, they partnered with Gauteng, and they had a joint program for deaf learners. Very interesting innovation. All visually impaired learners were invited to an interprovincial winter school to deal with some of the issues that they were confronted with. There were weekend supervised classes, holiday support program for our special schools in the case of the Eastern Cape. Now, I also indicated that we focused a lot on teacher support because we realized that capacitating our teachers to deal with that which was abnormal to our teachers. They were not accustomed to having to deal with gaps in content, removal of certain content areas to the extent that we had now implemented in this particular period. And if you look at the teacher support program, it included content workshop, standard setting meetings, information sharing meetings, where results were analyzed, target sets, subject improvement plans put in place, and policies mediated. There were changes in policies, and those policies had to be mediated. We also had what we refer to as accountability meetings, where teachers had to then account for what was being done, and content manuals were developed. The target audience in terms of the teacher development program was in the main underperforming school. And in the last table, we provide the reach. In all our programs, we try to understand and evaluate to what extent were we getting to the targeted audience. And you will look in the last column in terms of what was the final reach in terms of this particular intervention. Here's an example of the Free State. Now, what is very important, and I'm showing you just the Free State as an example, but across all provinces, we asked them to identify particular subjects where learners were struggling. And in the case of Free State, they identified business studies, and we requested that all provinces include home languages. Now, you and I are aware that home languages is important. You fail the home language, you fail the entire examination. So therefore, Free State had to focus on Sesotho, where they looked at dramatization of literature books to help learners, analysis of the literature, SBA tasks for learners. And I can go through all of the provinces, but I'm going to just quickly look at Gauteng, and I think Gauteng has a very effective, what is referred to as the SIP program. It's a secondary school improvement program, and they particular focus on schools that perform below 60% in terms of teacher development as well as support. And they also looked at English FAR. Now, here again, another example of what Gauteng had done with regard to its special schools. Now, interesting, Gauteng simulated examination experiences for learners coming from special school. Now, this was, I thought, extremely creative on the part of Gauteng. Now, you and I are also aware that learners from special schools are always subjected to additional anxiety when confronted with an examination. And what Gauteng did was that they exposed them to special physical exercises to calm them down, breathing exercises that assisted these learners. They even had coaches to learners, helping them to understand issues of time management, class assistants to be on standby to support these learners with any particular need that may have arisen. So that has given you a sense of how the provincial departments, overseen by the national department, attempted to bridge the losses that were suffered by these learners over those 2 years. Now, very quickly, I'm going to go through some of the nationally driven learner support programs, and I'm going to be looking specifically at grade 12. I spoke about the revised annual teaching plan. We reintroduced the June examination. We, on an annual basis, produce what is referred to as a diagnostic report, and the diagnostic report takes the performance of learners from the previous years, look at some of the areas where learners are struggling, and then provides remedial measures, remedial program that could be implemented by teachers. So the diagnostic report was mediated, made available to all our schools, so they know exactly what are the areas in every subject that they need to focus on. There were special study guides that were developed to assist our teachers, literature study guides, and DBE and its strategic partners. And we want to say a special thank you to our strategic partners who really went out of the way to support the department in terms of online material. And we had an intensive remote and digital project, which we refer to as the RDL program. And these were some of our partners, and there were two key drivers in terms of our RDL program, and that was the Chwelo Pele program, which targets grade R to grade 11, and the Woza Matric, which focuses specifically on grade 12. Now, here we look at what exactly was the purpose of these two programs, and their purpose was to supplement, to support, but also very important, we did not lose sight of the psychosocial support that was required by our learners. And as a result, both these programs supported our learners in that particular area and also provided them with support. And I'll show you how these two programs were made available on different social media platforms so that we could reach as many learners as possible. we had the Iona FM, where episodes were uploaded per month and made accessible on internet. We have Spotify, which was also a podcast platform where we also had material made available to learners through these two platforms. Knowing full well that our learners are very much in tune with Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and WhatsApp, we also made sure that we make all the materials from these two programs available on the social media platform. And again, we want to extend our appreciation to all our RDL partners that are listed here that made these online programs available. Very quickly, I'll give you a sense of the reach of some of these programs. And if you look at this particular case, in the month of January, we targeted 1.5 million viewers. Numbers would have dropped in certain months depending on what was happening in the school program. And if you look at it in June, because of our winter program, that also caused a drop in terms of the number of viewers that participated, particularly in the Woza Matric program. We made this available on YouTube, and in the case of the YouTube, this also gives you an indication of subscribers versus viewers. And again, we find that there was a substantial reach, and there was also substantial indication that the watch time was reasonable in terms of what was expected. And here we're looking at Woza Matric in terms of the reach again, in terms of your YouTube. Then we go on to this very interesting mobile app linked to WhatsApp. Now, what this made this particular program very valuable is that it was a digital platform based on instant messaging. But what was interesting here is that the learner could send a message, and on the other end, there was a teacher, an online teacher, who could then respond. So there was this two-way interaction, which made this program much more beneficial. Our Matric Live mobile app was even more exciting, because what it did is that it allowed our Matric learners to register in specific subjects. And what this program did was that it put together examinations from past year papers. It put together examinations which our learners could take, and this gives you an example of the numbers that were taken up by our learners. And also, because they responded and there was some method of assessing it, we could even gauge what was the average performance of learners across these tests. And here you are given the topics together with the subjects, where this mobile app, which allowed learners in their own space, in their own relaxed environment, to take these assessments that were put together by this particular app. We did not lose sight of the fact that a number of our learners lived in environments where they would not have had access to online platforms, and therefore we still made available printed material. And this is an indication of some of the printing material. We had almost 78 Matric study guides in 22 subjects and 12 home languages, and we also included home languages. And the rest of the slide gives you the detail in terms of the various study guides that were presented, and I'm not going to go through that. We as a department also made all this material, which was in hard copy, made available in ICT format. And these were the platforms on which they were made available. We also went the extra mile of having an online source, so that for those that could not access them, they could get it electronically on one of the storage devices. Now, very interesting, we are in keeping with the latest technology. We are looking at virtual classrooms in 18 schools, and this is being done with our various partners, and we think that this is really going to take us into the schools and the classroom of the future. The LTSM support, again, we're just providing it to you, and I know that you could look at the detail of all of this later. Our Siyavula textbooks, we're providing the kind of learners, the teachers that it reached out to. We even give you an indication of the maths and science exercises that were completed in terms of the Siyavula textbook. In the case of Mind the Gap, we provide you with the different subjects, and we provide you with the number of clicks in terms of the number of times that learners would have accessed this particular program. Now, something that we have found to be extremely valuable is our autumn, winter, and our spring support program. And let me just inform you that our DG visits possibly each of these sites where autumn, winter, and spring programs are conducted. How he does that, I'm still not aware. I am convinced that he has some internal turbocharge that drives him and gets him to all of these venues and visits each of these programs. And I can't again go through each of them, but I'm just going to take the winter program and give you some kind of a profile of what transpired in these programs. This is some of this is the venues that were visited in terms of numbers. And for example, if you look at the autumn classes or the autumn program, it in the main focused on revision of work done in term 1 and term 2. Your winter classes or your winter program would focus on work done up to June. So there's constant enrichment, and I'll give you greater insight into what happens in these winter programs. Now, this gives you what were the purpose of these support classes. And the focus was not in the main covering new topic. If you look at it, of all the centers visited, 88.9% of them focused on revision. 29.3% of them focused on catch-up. If you look at the types of learners, and it's interesting that these programs, in most cases, were visited or supported or attended by all grade 12 learners. In fact, if you look at all grade 12 learners, there were 41.8%. But there were also programs which focused on high flyer, because we didn't want to ignore our learners that are at the upper end. We also had programs that focused on progress learners, those that were moderate achievers. There was also focus on particular subjects. We also looked at programs that focused on our worst performing schools. So it was a hybrid in terms of what it accommodated. This gives you an example of the duration of the program. 57.7% of the programs extended over 10 days. This is the winter program. So our teachers and our learners have worked extremely hard. 34.1% of them extended over 6 hours a day during that 10-day period. Now, attendance was also good. If you look at the table on the left, 80 to 100% attendance was observed in 77.4% of all the classes and the programs that were visited. So there was very good attendance. And on the right, you are given an indication of the numbers that participated in these programs. And if you look at the numbers, they varied from 50 to 100, right up to 400 at some of these programs. And this is just giving you an indication of the range of subjects. So there was a wide range of subjects focusing on home languages, even looking at non-languages, and these are all the non-languages, and we're also giving you an indication of the numbers in terms of these non-languages. And I'm going to conclude by very quickly giving you some sense of how did our learners respond to these particular programs. And these are some of the generic statements that came from learners that were interviewed. 98.6% of the learners interviewed reported that a structured timetable was followed, just not a haphazard program. And 94.7% of the learners surveyed received additional subject material, 99.1% of the learners interviewed felt that the winter classes were beneficial. And that's the reason this kept them there and they attended as required. 63.3% of the learners responded that new topics for term 3 were even taught where it was possible. Now that's the first part, and I'm hoping that we have convinced you that despite the learning losses, we have done the best that we could. And I think we don't labor under the fallacy that we will be able to cover up the learning losses. I mean, learning losses will be covered over an extended period of time. But I think what was possible was done. Now let me move on to part B, and I'm hoping, Mr. Mslanga, that I still have time. Let's look at to what extent is the exam system ready to cater for this all-important examination. And you and I are aware that learners, when they enter grade R or grade 1, their focus is already on grade 12. And somehow, not just in South Africa, but across the world, this exit examination is possibly regarded as the most important. And it's interesting these days that if you go to apply for a job, you may have a PhD, but they still want to see your matric certificate. So it is a high stakes and an extremely important certificate and examination in the country. We are less than 18 hours away from this first examination that will be written tomorrow at 9 o'clock across 6,889 centers. And like I tried to indicate, this class has suffered major setbacks of COVID, load shedding, and therefore I think the minister has given us a clear directive that we should make sure that this examination does not add to the inconvenience or the discomfort that these learners have already suffered. I can also indicate that national examinations in South Africa has progressed over the last 23 years. In fact, the first examination was administered in 1996. So it would be 27 years. Yes. That's when the first exam was administered in 1996. And I can also confidently say that the South African examination system is internationally comparable to international standards with regard to its administration. This gives you an example of the examination cycle, which starts with the setting of question papers. Very important is making sure candidates are registered, question papers are printed, then comes the all-important writing, the marking, the capture of the marks, and then finally the release and certification. Now, very quickly, Minister has provided us with broad statistics, but I will give you a little more detail. And this is a very good infogram, which indicates the number of full-time candidates, part-time candidates. And in total, if one looks at both our full-time and part-time candidates, we are looking at a load of almost 900,000 candidates that will be writing this examination. We have 162 question papers that have been set. We're looking at, is it 10.2 million question papers that will be printed and administered, 9.7 million scripts that will be finally marked. The examination is written across 6,889 exam centers. We utilize 72,000 invigilators. These are the teachers, educators, private persons that would help us with the actual conduct of the examination. 53,922 markers have already been appointed, and from the first week in December, they will assemble at 190 different marking centers to mark the 9.7 million scripts. Now, these are our numbers over the years. And I think the important point that we want to add is that from 2020 to 2023, there are more than 100,000 more candidates that have been added to the system. So that confirms that our throughput is improving. And this is certainly an important point, from 607,000 to 717,000. This is a graphical representation of the numbers over the years. Also very important is our part-time candidature. Now, part-time candidates would be learners who have written the exam in previous years but may not have satisfied all the requirements. We give them an opportunity to come back. And learners from as far back as 2008 will come back to write this examination. And what is interesting is that the number of part-time candidates has increased by 13,000, from 168 to 181,000. This is the breakdown in terms of the numbers per province. And it's interesting that 4 of our largest provinces, Limpopo, Eastern Cape, KZN, and Gauteng, constitute more than 70% of the number of learners that write the examination. This is our part-time enrollment, and one sees the increases and the drops. And something that we are not alarmed by is the significant increase in Gauteng. 15,000 more part-time candidates, because learners all gravitate to the economic hub of the country. But it's also interesting that Mpumalanga has also showed a significant increase in the number of part-time candidates. Progressed candidates, these are candidates that would not have satisfied the requirements in grade 11. But because our policy says no learner must spend more than 4 years in a phase, these learners are progressed. And we monitor these progressed learners because they must be provided with the appropriate support in their grade 12 academic year. These are the subject enrollments. Now, because the overall number of part-time candidates the number of full-time candidates has dropped by 35,000, your subject enrollments will also show a commensurate drop in terms of numbers. Now, we monitor very closely our technical subjects because that's where we want to see the increases. And we're seeing some increases, but it's not as significant as we would want it to be. And obviously, in those specializations where there are drops, those are areas that we will certainly give more attention to in the next year. Now, this is a very important slide, and we put this here so that we once again confirm that we are monitoring throughput. Here, what we are doing, we show you what were the numbers of this class of 2023 when they were in grade 10, when they were in grade 11, and now in grade 12. Now, what is interesting is that in grade 10, we had 974,000. 833,000 of that 974,000 got to grade 10. 85.5% of our learners made it from grade 10 into grade 11. And then 74.3% of those learners then made it into grade 12. Now, here again, there's clear evidence that our throughput is improving. It's possibly not where it needs to be, but given the fact that we are monitoring it closely, and given the fact that we're giving attention to schools improving their throughput, we are seeing this kind of shift in the right direction. And this is just the graphical representation of the throughput. Now, having given you the scope and size of the exam, now let's move very quickly to what Minister has started with in terms of readiness. And when we talk about readiness, it starts from registration. And we've come to learn over the years, if you want to make sure that every candidate gets his or her results at the end, you must make sure that candidates are accurately registered for the right subject, at the right center, and at the right level. And as a result, we are spending a lot of time in terms of verifying our registration data, and we are making a commitment to ensuring that every learner that writes the exam, when Minister makes the announcement on the 18th and when the MEC is released on the 19th of January, every learner must receive his or her result if he or she has written. Our question papers, all 162 question papers have been set by a panel of experts They've been moderated by our own experts coming from the DBE. They've been externally moderated by the Quality Assurance Council. They are now with our provincial departments, and they are being printed and packed. In fact, our question papers for tomorrow are ready to be written. In fact, question papers for the entire week, we are ready, and it's all systems go. We also offer 18 non-official languages. These are your foreign languages, and the IEB sets these question papers on our behalf. So we are accommodating our non-official languages as well. The printing, packing, storage, and distribution, I can't tell you too much, but all I can say is that we had the State Security Agency that has done an audit of all our centers, and wherever question papers are stored, they have satisfied strict criteria, and we are confident that nothing will go wrong in terms of where these important functions are taking place. South African Sign Language is possibly one of our pet child, and we are now implementing South African Sign Languages for the 6th time. And what is interesting is the technology that is used in terms of South African Sign Language. The question paper gets signed, and that signing of the question paper gets recorded. Each learner receives an individual copy of the signed copy of the question paper. The learner then responds by signing. That gets recorded via the webcam, and it gets marked centrally in Pretoria by specialists in sign language. So we're doing extremely well, and it's offered across all 9 provinces in 23 schools. I think I spoke about the audit of storage points, and I'm not going to spend too much of time on that. This is the centers across the country that will be writing the examination. And I think rightly, we say that the matric examination is possibly second in size and magnitude to the general election. The difference with the national examination is that we have to keep the tempo and the momentum going for 6 weeks across these 6,800 centers. Invigilators, we've spent a lot of time. We've changed our approach in terms of invigilators, because we found that some of the irregularities that occur because our invigilators do not execute their responsibilities correctly. And that we have strengthened, and we're confident that all our invigilators are now au fait with the procedures and protocols that must be followed in the examination room. Here again, concessions and accommodation refers to learners with special needs, and we make sure that all our learners get assessed, and we accommodate them, whether it be in terms of devices, specialized equipment. Our schools are ready to administer learners that have any special need, and this has been well managed, and our schools have been trained for this particular purpose. The writing is obviously where we focus a lot of attention, and we have, as I indicated, trained our invigilators. We have a team of monitors that will go out, and what is also important is that we've profiled the risk status of each of our centers, and we will deploy monitors based on the risk profile of our centers. Now, where the risk profile is high, we have even replaced our chief invigilators in terms of the management of the exam. The marker selection has been completed. There are strict criteria for the appointment of markers, and the marker criteria and its application gets verified, gets double-checked, triple-checked to make sure that we appoint the right people to mark and make the judgment on the work of learners, which has gone over the last 13 years. This is the number of markers, and it provides you the breakdown per province. This is the number of marking centers, and our DG has made a commitment here that he's going to visit each of the marking centers. Am I correct, DG?
I've done so in the past.
Yes, and our DG, like I said, takes a keen interest on what's happening on the ground. Now, after the papers are written, we have what is referred to as the standardization of marking guideline. And we as a DBE will be convening 147 marking standardization meetings. And some of these meetings are convened virtually, others are convened face-to-face. And at these meetings, our chief markers, internal moderators that are going to be involved with the marking, together with our examining panel, as well as the Umalusi panel that was responsible for the moderation, will look at the paper with a fresh eye and look at what are the alternative answers based on how learners may have interpreted the question, and put together a comprehensive marking guideline. And that comprehensive marking guideline becomes the standard that would be utilized at each of the marking centers. What is also very important and interesting is that during this process, markers, that is chief markers, internal moderators, are authorized. And if a chief marker and internal moderator is not authorized, they will not be able to undertake this process of managing the marking at the 190 marking centers. This gives you an indication of the quality assurance of marking. Again, there are clear protocols, control measures to make sure that marking meets the high standard that is required of this particular process. Then comes the mark capture, where every mark gets captured twice to make sure that there's no error in the capture process. I spoke about the monitoring, and we are strengthening the monitoring. We've given each province a 70% threshold that during every session, at least 70% of our centers must be monitored, so that nothing untoward, nothing irregular is going to miss the watchful eye of our officials that are out there. In terms of DBE, we also deploy our own part-time monitors who are trained, 82 of them, that would be in each of the provinces to make sure that the examination runs according to plan. And here comes one of the most difficult areas, curbing of examination irregularity. Our DG always says that we can do as much as we want and put in all the best security measures. But the one element that we cannot guarantee is the human element. But we have appealed through various mechanisms and measures that all officials, educators that are involved will maintain the code of conduct that has been provided to them. And we are confident that there would be no serious glitches in this particular examination. And we are appealing to our parents, to members of the public, please instill in our learners, please instill in our children the need to be honest when you are in the examination room, and also to bring to our attention any information that you may have that you think would assist us in dealing with the scourge of examination irregularities, which is not just a South African phenomenon, but is something that occurs in all examinations throughout the world. We have an examination hotline that would be managed on a 24/7 basis. So please call the hotline if you are aware of any information. Exam management is based on risk management. We've identified the risks, and Minister has alluded to load shedding, water shedding, as well as issues of protest. And we're appealing to our communities, do not use the examinations as a mechanism to further your own ends. There are clear protocols and mechanisms to deal with dissatisfactions in communities. When you disrupt an examination, you're disrupting the life and the plans and the aspiration of our learners. So let's not shoot ourselves in the foot, and let's not disturb these learners who've prepared long and hard to write these examinations. But these are the risks, and I'm not going to go through them in great detail. I am reaching the last few slides. These are the important dates, and I mentioned already the release date the date on which Umalusi will standardize these results. And finally, I think we appreciate the support of our parents, school principals, educators, officials, teacher unions, school governing bodies, and professional bodies, and all other institutions. We appreciate their support, not only for our learners, but also in terms of your support in making sure that we have a successful 2023 examination. We continue to depend on your support during this crucial period of the writing of the examination. We want to once again, as our minister has already done, wish all our learners well over this examination period. And we're advising our learners, do not be tempted to engage in any irregular activity. You will certainly be caught out, and the sanctions and the punishment is too ghastly to contemplate on your young lives. I want to conclude with the words of our president in the statement that he released this morning. Stronger together is a belief that came to life for the Springbok supporters throughout the country and throughout the world. And let us hold on to this particular notion that we are stronger together. And I believe what we saw last night and what we are going to see in our grade 12 learners is about nation building. We are together building a nation so that we could become a formidable force to contend with. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Paulia. Thank you to the Minister for the presentations. We have come to question time now. I would like some hands. If there are questions, I know there was information overload. We could still be processing some of it. But I will leave that to you if there are questions. I know that you've requested to interview the Minister after this, some of you. That's why you want to keep your questions to yourself. Oh, okay. One hand. Okay. Oh, two now. Moloto, let's start with you.
All right, thank you very much. Moloto Moloto from ENCA. Minister, I'm sure you have seen in the Sunday Times today, they are talking about the over 900 pupils in Mpumalanga in about 20 schools that the report indicates that they were involved in the leaking of the question paper last year, and they are still not allowed to write the examination this year. Perhaps if you can outline or anyone else, the consequences for such irregularities, particularly for the learners, because perhaps they may not understand, unlike adults who already know what they stand to gain or lose. But also, if you can just indicate at this point in time where the process is at now, whether there hasn't been an attempt to kind of like circumvent the system, particularly to leak the question papers. Haven't you had any instance, for instance, where you caught somebody or you've really been running this unit tightly?
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Sorry.
Good morning, Minister.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Siroma here. I just wanted to find out the issue of learner readiness. You speak extensively about learners being ready to write, but are provinces ready to administer these examinations? I think it also goes to the concerns of what Moloko has spoken about now, the issues of the papers being leaked or there being some kind of irregularity within provinces. So are provinces, all 9 provinces, are they ready to administer these examinations? Thank you.
All right. I was just checking. Yeah, there are no more questions on the WhatsApp. Minister, please. Dr. Paul is the real culprit on the Mpumalanga.
No, thank you very much for the question. And indeed, it's one of those very upsetting things I have to do as a minister. It's really depressing to have to dealing with the consequences of cheating, especially on learners. And the problem is that you have to protect the integrity of exams at all costs, because as Dr. Polio said, it's a very important paper. It's a very important paper, and you don't take light anything that threatens the integrity of exams. And the consequences are really dire. And that's why even MECs have these pledging ceremonies, just to make sure that, because those pledging are just not only getting students together, to make them aware and appeal to them not to engage in that, because as I said, it really depresses me when I have to deal with the consequences, so that because some of them are young, in some, like in Mpumalanga, they were tempted by educators. I mean, if we have to follow the Mpumalanga matter. But the things that you can't let them through, even if you think they fell into the trap of cheating. And I've had to deal with this very unfortunate situation. The minimum is 2 years not sitting for exams. And for a young person, 2 years, it's a long time. It's a long time, and they may not be able to get back. I've had to deal with parents who, when we had these cases in the Eastern Cape and KZN, where you find a learner, if that learner would have passed even without cheating. They pass all the other subjects with high marks. They get involved in cheating in one paper, and then they have to face the full consequences of what we do in cheating. I mean, 2 years sanction, it's a long time for a young person. And that's what the sanction is. And Dr. Polo will explain, it's a very painful process. And that's why, as I say, we go through all the efforts. Almost every province had your pledge ceremony to really drum and drive home to these learners that don't do it. That's the last place you go into. The province readiness, the reports come from that. If there's one section, and I'm not buying Dr. Polio's, if there's one very efficient section in the department's exam section, against, because it's a high stake section, we work extremely well throughout. As I say, we're using SAS, even state security agencies, just to make sure that we protect the integrity of exams, especially that it's a national exam. Now with your technology, if a paper leaks in Gauteng, you'll find that it's in both other, because there's a cousin, they send it on the WhatsApp. So we really try to do everything we possibly can. But in terms of provinces, and I hope one day we'll reach a stage where our system is not as fragile as it is. Because teachers in high schools just don't have a life. They teach Saturdays, they teach weekends, they have morning classes. It's just such a very heavy responsibility on them, especially after COVID, because they had to, despite dealing with what has to be dealt with in the current academic year, they have to claw back what was lost in the previous year. The 60%, well, 60% is a loss. It's actually losing more than half the year of teaching. The next year, it's not as if you have a full year, especially this cohort, they lost when they were rotating. Our estimations that when they were rotating, they lost almost 40%. So it means a cohort that you can easily say it lost almost a year's of teaching. So teachers then have to try and claw back what they have lost. But I can assure you, from the reports we've been receiving from provinces through CEM, through the DG's monitoring visit and Dr. Polio's visit, provinces have done as much as they possibly could. And I have no doubt that they've really put into their heart. But maybe Dr. Potlo, if you could speak about this cheating thing, because it is a very depressing and disappointing matter when our young people find themselves getting into cheating. Because if you are a non-performing student, you will never pass with cheating, because it will take your time. There's no way you can pass with cheating. You all know you can't pass, because you are going to lose time trying to cribble the other things in time up. If you are high-performing students, as I said, some of the students that were caught cheating, it's kids who could have passed on their own without even getting into a cheating exercise. And just maybe it's the moral decadence or the fear or the anxiety. Children always get tempted, and sometimes, as I say, they are lured into this unfortunate practice. But we can't get any softer, because we have to protect the integrity of exams at all costs. And yeah, but we also want them to grow up as very honest adults who've got integrity.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you, Mutapo and Tsego, for the two very loaded questions. But I must thank the Minister. I don't know how many of you know that the Minister arrived 4 o'clock this morning into the country and landed into this press briefing. In fact, we were very doubtful that she was going to make it. So, Minister, thank you very much. And I think in a few hours she'll be leaving again because of her responsibilities in her portfolio and even in the continent and in the region. So thank you, Minister, for coming. Just 1 or 2 points, maybe. I think the Minister is right. Part of the reason why learners sometimes would become vulnerable to irregularities is lack of preparedness. And you'd appreciate that this time around, the key task that we had to carry out was that if we suspect that this class is the hardest hit, and the evidence seemed to have confirmed that in many ways. Dr. Pulia went through it, whether it's rotational timetable or whether it's a change in our assessment, those things would have contributed to the profile of this class. We said we have to go extraordinary. We have to do things that we have not done before. And you would have seen many of them there. Even the scope of monitoring that we covered. Usually, for instance, giving an example of my own program, when I go out to provinces and monitor, I would sample a district to do that. This time around, I went for 2 districts. I would sample 1 district and target about 10 schools or so. This time, I went for 2 and targeted 15 schools. To increase the scope. And the same applies to the team that even went monitoring. What was also not mentioned in the presentation, Minister, is that there are also learner support programs that happen during the weekends. Over and above autumn, winter, and spring. And there's something called last push, others call it last mile. Where you make sure that 2 or 3 days before they write, you also get them together, get them prepared. And some people think that there's everything wrong with doing that. There's nothing wrong. All learners all over the world are prepared for public exams. In fact, the middle class go even beyond what ordinarily it's done. They'll get special tutors who will sit with their children day or days before they sit for the exams to prepare them. And that's what the government is doing in South Africa. And what we have done, Minister, with this class, we also said, what are the basic things that they need to do? And we identified 5 of them, which helped the previous classes. And I've been leading, communicating that message. We said the first one is to come to school every day, to receive extra tuition, but also to prepare and study for your exams. Because learners who are serious about their exams, they go to school every day, even during days that they are not writing, to go and prepare for the exams. And learners who do well, they go to school every day. And we said to them, there's no replacement for that. And it helps to build confidence to the extent that you become less vulnerable to these people who are out there, to get learners involved in irregularities. The second point, we said, it's a must to follow a personal study timetable. From Monday to Sunday, covering at least 2 subjects per day for a minimum of 6 hours, and home language must be part of that. And then the third point, we said, pay attention to what the teachers are saying and doing. Because these teachers who are teaching them are teachers who are experienced not only in teaching, but also in dealing with scripts for grade 12 learners. And therefore, whatever they say, it's crucial to getting them to prepare for the exams. A teacher is an indispensable resource. Where there's no device that can dispose of a teacher. In fact, if you bring a device, you replicate a good teacher. That's what devices are doing. You replicate a good teacher. And therefore, a teacher, and a very good teacher, it's indispensable. And we said, pay attention. And you can only do that when you are in class. There is nothing that can replace the experience of being in class at the most crucial time. And we said the fourth point is to use the materials at their disposal. And when I talked to them, all of them had their notes from their lessons, which is material number 1. Number 2, they had their test papers, which are based also on previous question papers and on getting them to understand what they are going to be tested on. Thirdly, they also have previous question papers. Fourthly, they've got study guides that were shared by Dr. Polya. And we then said to them, all that you need is to use those materials that are at your disposal. And how do you do that? You read and practice. You read your materials and you practice by answering test papers, previous question papers on your own, because the exam is going to subject them to answering questions on their own. And you can only know how much you understand and how far you can go with the question paper if you answer questions on your own. And we even asked amongst them, those who got high marks such as 90% and upwards, we said, how did you get that? They said, read and practice. That's the only way. You go through your materials, and after that, you practice answering questions. And the last point, which is number 5, we said, be your brother's keeper. Be your sister's keeper. Instill discipline amongst each other. Peer discipline is one of the most effective disciplines that you can get in the world. And so that's what we've really tried to assist them to do. Preparedness of provinces, we start beginning of the year. We call first phase of the engagement with provinces to get them ready, beginning of the year. The first quarter we do that. And then towards the last quarter of the school calendar year, starting from September, October, we met with individual provinces, over and above what the minister referred to. Dr. Polya's section would have gone out to each province more than once. And then I convene meetings with individual provinces. In addition to the other work that they report to us about, they would tell us about their state of readiness and would play the devil's advocate, ask questions that you are asking, and maybe ask some questions that ordinarily you wouldn't ask in public that relate to security matters of the question papers and so on. And we've had those sessions with them, with each one of them. They have presented to us, indeed we are confident, Minister, that we've done what is humanly possible. And if you allow me, because at least it is the day that I should have gone to my place of worship, the rest we leave it to the Almighty. And in addition to the pledges, I've never seen, provinces convening schools to even bring communities, faith leaders to come and pray, just to demonstrate that what is beyond human capacity, divine powers must intervene. Because we want an events-free exams. And as Dr. Polia said, repeating what the President said, I am confident that the Minister, the whole nation is behind this class. We've met with all stakeholders in basic education, call them pre-exam meetings. Whether you call them 5 teacher unions, Association of School Governing Bodies, professional bodies, we've met with all of them to rally them behind the class of 2023. And the last point, Minister, before we started with this briefing, I was saying to colleagues as we were waiting, when I wrote my own Matric exams, I never felt as confident as these young people. When I met with them, they said, we can't wait to write. I never felt that way. They said, we can't wait to write. I said, are you ready? He said, we want you to bring it on immediately. We've been working hard for this, and we waited for 12 to 13 years. Thank you, Dr. Paul.
Oh, you want to deal with Mpumalanga?
Mpumalanga.
Okay. Before you speak, can I just check if there are any other questions? There's just one more question for the Minister, so I'd like that when she comes, she deals with it. Okay. And that PYEI question, Minister, after Dr. Paul. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to add to what Minister and DG has already mentioned, I think the issue of are our provinces ready? I think DG has covered the detail. But also to stress the point that preparation for an examination starts 18 months before the date of the examination. And this regular monitoring happens on an ongoing basis. And I must say that from our MECs to our heads of department, examination administration is prioritized. Now, DG did not indicate that on Friday at 2 o'clock, our DG met with all our heads of department. And at that meeting, which only concluded around 5 o'clock, we went through the final checklist and going through province by province to look at what is it that still needs to be done. And yesterday, there were 2 meetings with key stakeholders. On Thursday, DG, a meeting was held, convened by a Director General, with district heads of exams, provincial heads of exams, and district directors. And that meeting only concluded at 9 o'clock at night, looking at whether provinces are ready to administer this exam. So I think we've done what's humanly possible. The rest is certainly in the hands of the Almighty. Now, maybe let's talk about the 935 learners at Mpumalanga. I think, Minister, we must maybe just make the point clear that the 935 learners in Mpumalanga were not involved in a leakage of an examination paper. I think the last leakage we had was in 2020 in Gauteng, and the perpetrator in that case was arrested, and unfortunately legal processes and the court processes take a long time, and this matter is still in court. I think both Mr. Mslanga and I, as key witnesses, appeared in the Johannesburg Regional Court, I think more than 5 times this year, to deal with that matter. So perpetrators are being dealt with. We're hoping that at the next media briefing, we could indicate exactly what has happened to this one individual who leaked that paper. So the point is, what transpired in Mpumalanga last year was something different. And this is where our learners are getting smarter. Now, what happened in Mpumalanga is that once the question paper is opened in the examination room around 20 to 9, the exam commences at 9 o'clock, the security bundles get opened around 20 to 9, and then learners are given a 10-minute reading period. Once the security envelopes are open, a teacher smuggled a paper out of the exam room and then made it available to subject teachers to work out the answers. And then the answers were then transmitted to learners who smuggled their cell phones into the exam room. And learners are getting extremely smart. They know exactly where they're going to sit in an exam room, and they then get into the exam room before the exams start, and then they would use press stick and stick the cell phone to their desk, just underneath the desk at which they will be sitting. Now, we've come to realize these kinds of practices that they resort to. So this was a serious offense, and therefore 935 of them were given an opportunity to present themselves to a disciplinary hearing. They were found guilty, and they have been sanctioned for 3 examinations, which means they cannot write the November 2023 exam, they can't write the June 2024 exam, they can't write the November 2024 exam. The next exam that they will be able to write will be the 25 May-June exam. So they were given a 3 examination barring. Now, Minister has indicated that the barring period may be extensive. Previously, Minister, it was 3 years barring. Now what we've done, we've reduced it to 3 exam barring, which in essence is a year and a half. But I think we need to also instill in our learners the issue of honesty, integrity, and morality. And therefore, we are again sending out a clarion call to all our learners. Do not attempt, irrespective of how desperate you are, you rather come back and write an examination rather than resorting to this kind of practice, which is going to mar your reputation for life. So that was the situation in Mpumalanga, but let me indicate that we've gone out of our way, and even the province, together with the district and the circuit involved, have done whatever is possible to make sure that that does not recur this year. And we are confident that across the province, we have done what is necessary to prevent that kind of practice. Thank you. Thank you, DJ. Thank you.
No, there is a question on the PYE. The last report I got, I don't know the latest, DG. The last report when we had Triple M was that for this year, only provinces that have the budget will continue with the current learners. So it was Gauteng, only, there were 2 provinces only which were able to continue, and Gauteng was one of them. It was Gauteng and what? Just that I didn't bring, but I know they could continue until December. So we have to wait for Treasury to give us an indication if we will be able to continue with how many learners. And my assumption is that, and I'm really calling it an assumption, now that they've not indicated that they're not giving us money, they are likely to give us money. Or is it too with these austerity measures? I'm ready, because in some instances, it has proven to be extremely, extremely helpful to have those PYEs. So I am crossing my fingers that Treasury does give us something for next year. But for this year, only 2 provinces could continue beyond October. And it's only those provinces which had surplus and which could pay up to December. But other provinces had to stop in October as per agreement. And we are awaiting Treasury to give us an indication if we are continuing next year. So I can see DG is very scared that I should commit myself to say we're continuing next year. So I'm hopeful.
Thank you so much, Minister. PYEI officially ended at the end of September. So it's a waiting game between now and whenever. Thank you so much. We've come to the end of this briefing. It's been an hour and a half of loads of information. We appreciate the support. Let's continue the engagement. You will indicate in here. Okay, that's fine. Thank you so much. Let's close it.